Well, hello everybody, I'm Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever and the author of Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. Thanks Brenda for inviting me, and sorry that I can't be with you in person. I have lots of respect for conscious companies and your ethos to ignite a socio-economic and political environment with an authentic expression of ethics and consciousness. Indeed, we need both. You work to empower leaders to address societal imbalances, maintain transparency, and understand the impact of conscious, ethical leadership. That's exactly what the world needs. Many people ask me what Net Positive is all about. To put it simply, it's all about putting humanity back into the heart of business, which is why I like your theme today of conscious over compliance, doing what is right as opposed to doing what is minimally required. What I call the harder right versus the easier wrong. This is indeed a crucial moment for humanity. We are at a delicate tipping point. We have found that our linear, extractive consumption and production systems, which have created an enormous wealth for many, are actually running to an end, pushing the limits of what our climate, oceans, and biodiversity can handle, and frankly, still leaving too many people behind. This is the first time actually that we're falling backwards on the Sustainable Development Goals, with more people falling in poverty or having to deal with food insecurity. Our inability to rise to the challenge is causing an incredible damage all around the world, not least in the region that you represent. It is a ticking time bomb for people and planet. Our future literally hangs in the balance. Either we face the catastrophic results of breaking all of our planetary boundaries by keeping business as usual, or we use the moment to rise to our senses and make the radical changes that are needed to get towards a more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable future. This will require sacrifice and hard work. But despite the challenges, we simply cannot give up. Some might say it's impossible. But you agree with me that impossible is not a fact. It's an attitude, and only an attitude. And our attitudes are fully under our own control. We're close to positive tipping points in many areas. Technologies are moving fast and cost curves are coming down quicker than we anticipated. Things are moving. The cost of not acting is actually becoming higher than the cost of acting, which makes it such an incredible business opportunity. And the smart companies are starting to understand this. In electric vehicles, heat pumps, solar panels, I believe we're approaching the tipping points already. Whilst undoubtedly, in some other areas, we still have our work cut out, not least in making technology available to emerging markets and providing financing at lower cost. I actually believe that we have the funds, the resources, the technologies, and the knowledge to actually address most of these challenges. Many people have said that this is not a crisis of climate change or inequality or food security. After all, they're all symptoms. Many have called this a crisis of greed, of apathy, of selfishness. And that requires above all leadership, moral or cooperative leadership that you are discussing today. We collectively lack the ability to do what we know is right. In fact, recent work by the Howe Institute, on which I sit on the board, shows that people feel that only 17% of our leaders tell the truth. The same amount of leaders, only 17% take a stand on moral topics and put principles first. And yes, less than 25% of employees see managers exhibit the qualities of this moral leadership. This may well be the real deficit, the moral or ethical leadership. In our book, Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive, we discuss this courageous or conscious leadership. The purpose of power, of consciousness, of being human, of mustering the courage to drive the bigger changes that are needed. Striving for a regenerative business model, moving from being less bad to being restorative, reparative, regenerative. Leadership is first and foremost about being good human beings, but it is also about understanding that you have to put the interest of others ahead of your own, knowing that by doing so, you're better off yourself as well. We indeed need moral leaders who are values-driven, who have a broader growth mindset, looking at these societal issues not as risk, but as enormous opportunities, who look beyond the short-term and shareholder primacy towards the longer-term value creation, who take responsibility for the total impact in this world, set targets that science demands, embrace the collaborative leadership that is needed to drive these broader transformative partnerships to change the world that we live in. Let's call these stakeholders models by its proper name, which I believe is actually moral capitalism. Most faithful to the original version of capitalism, expounded perhaps by the moral philosopher Adam Smith when he wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, and the often forgotten book, The Theory of Moral Sentiment, 17 years earlier. In moral capitalism, you can't create shared value without shared values. The focus is not on doing the right thing, but rather doing the next thing right. Moral leadership means putting people at the center of major decisions, seeing them in their full humanity and their own aspirations and concerns. For interest of time, I will point out perhaps 4 pillars of moral leadership, and they apply even more urgently, I believe, to the present crisis. 1, be driven by purpose. 2, imagine that we need to inspire and elevate others. 3, be animated by values and principles, such as courage and patience. And finally, keep building the moral muscle by wrestling with questions like right or wrong, fairness and justice, and what serves others and what doesn't. My wife just wrote a book which is called Values for a Life Economy, where we reconfirm what we should value, where we should prioritize, love and compassion for each other, love for the planet, and yes, for future generations. Becoming life economists, that should be our goal, working both ecology and economy, requiring this higher level of consciousness, realizing that first and foremost, we belong to tribe humanity, that we live in the same world, that self-sufficiency is an illusion. Until we embrace, I believe, the realities of our connectiveness, will continue to bear the consequences, the worst consequences of living our worlds in isolation. It requires us to act also in the service of future generations. We are, after all, the stewards of our planet and should aim to be remembered as great ancestors. And indeed, it starts with ourselves, our own consciousness. Nobel Prize winner Wangari Maathai, who was from your part of the world, said it well when she said that in the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called upon to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the time is now. Thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for being the moral leaders that the world so desperately needs.